Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Local Legends Thread. Tell tales of unexplained happenings where you live. I don't have a really good one, but here it goes. About a year ago, something started killing every animal in my neighborhood. It only came out at night and nobody ever saw it. It would sometimes rip out the throats, but sometimes it would somehow beat it to death without making it bleed. This thing would scale 6-foot-tall fences to get its prey. It was never caught, and we still have no clue what it was.
Not really anything spoopy around here. My city is absolute shit. But nearly everywhere else in my immediate vicinity has either a battlefield or another point of interest. Crawford Road. About a 10-minute drive from my house is this place called Crawford Road, where I have heard stories of people being beaten up for hanging around the road for too long, or disappearing altogether, though I have never seen any news stories directly linking a missing person to the dreaded street. The road leads directly through the middle of the woods and is completely devoid of any man-made lighting. Near the middle of the road is a bridge, and depending on who tells the story, was the site of a rage quit or a murder. The story goes that a bride had spent everything her family had preparing for a wedding, but was jilted. Distraught, she went to the bridge with a length of rope and ended her life. The other version of the story claims that a lady had bought a house on the road, which obviously would piss off the neighbors. To teach her a lesson, they stole her out of her home, took her to the bridge, tied the noose around her neck and pushed her off. They let her sit there until the police cut her down. Regardless of which story you believe, the ripples left over are the same. It is said that if you park your car under that bridge and turn it off, your car will not start back up. It won't start back up unless you push it out at least 10 feet away, which is difficult considering the bridge is at the bottom of a hill. One time, while going around the bend just before the bridge, just as it came into sight, gleaming in the pale moonlight, my brother and I saw what looked like someone dressed in white walk across the bridge, stop and jump, stopping about halfway down. I blinked and she was gone. The asylum. There's an old asylum not too far from Crawford, and as I've been told, the easiest way to sneak in is by parking near one end, walking into the woods, and taking a right at the dilapidated bootleg shack that is still occasionally in use. After about 3 minutes of walking, you can see the old brick building looming in the middle of the forest, surrounded by razor wire in the hopes of keeping people from sneaking in. A leather jacket over top of the wire grants you access to what can be described as living hell. I've been told of people hearing things, seeing things, being touched, and feeling warmth tingling, among other things. My own experience was cut short by a security guard more or less coming to my rescue. I had gotten in and was walking around when I started hearing whispering behind me, and then in front of me, and then beside me. Shadows seemed to dance as silhouettes loomed in the distance. It felt as if I was losing my mind. Just about when my anxiety had hit a breaking point, the guard shined his light on me and asked what the hell I was doing. He escorted me off the premises, looked a little less wound up with each step towards the fence. As soon as I was outside the gate, he darted for the guard booth and sat down, relief strewn across his face. Yorktown battlefield. Not too many stories about this, surprisingly. For a while, my brother and his friends would go around with a camera and record video. There were a few strange lights orbs, but the camera kinda sucked, so it was possible that they were bugs. The only interesting thing they caught was a disembodied voice angrily whispering, "Fuck you." I used to have it saved, but my computer died before I had the chance to back it up. Otherwise, I would post it for you guys.
My father used to tell me an event that used to happen when he was a kid, in which people would disappear in the woods, hills, or whatever, then turn up not knowing what was what, or what day it was. Except one. He said one of the men on the street turned up. He was somewhat of a hermit, so nobody really batted an eye. Mumbling about a cabin. My father's parents and the others tried to comfort him and calm him down, and he refused to go into detail. They did eventually calm him down, apparently, considering he was a hermit. Nobody visited him. His house started stinking up the whole street a week or so later. Police get called and they enter his house. Turns out he hung himself the night after. Never did find the cabin, even after exploring with friends as both a kid and adult.
Terre Haute, Indiana. There's a lot of local legends, but I think the most interesting is the Faceless Nun. Back in the 60s, there was an elderly nun at nearby St. Mary of the Woods who liked to paint portraits. She had a peculiar method, though. She always saved the face for the end. One day she took sick and died, leaving a self-portrait unfinished. Not long afterward, a young nun heard crying coming from a nearby room. She found an old woman bent over in a chair, sobbing. When she asked if the woman was all right, the figure turned, revealing a faceless figure. Apparently, after quite a few sightings into the 70s, they held a mass to lay the soul of the dead woman to rest. It worked, it seems, and the faceless nun hasn't been seen since. Not far away in Brazil, Indiana, there is a place called Spook Light Hill, a mile or so off a state road. It's a familiar story. A girl, called Lowry, if the legend is believed, is traveling home in the dark. I've heard variations on exactly what happened, but she disappeared. Her father came out to look for her with his lantern that night, and every night thereafter, wandering the road looking for her. This is supposed to manifest as glowing lights some distance away from the hill. I have been several times myself, and most of my friends have gone numerous times as well. Sometimes the lights appear, usually as brief flashes. Once, however, I saw something rather different. I saw a light appear. It didn't flash, but remained for some time. It looked to me like a bullseye lantern, scanning back and forth across the road, moving toward the car. I have only been more spooked a handful of times in my life. My brother, who was also present, swears he saw what looked like the bottom half of a pair of legs and the skirts of a dress beneath the light of the lantern.
I'm living in a small town in Vermont at the moment. Hopefully temporarily because it's so dull here. And there are these woods that are supposedly haunted. Apparently in '97, I think. This high school senior went missing there. He used to go into the woods to play his guitar because his parents didn't like the noise, and one day he just didn't come back. There were huge searches and everything, but they never found him. They think he must have fallen down somewhere, and they haven't had a proper search since 2005-ish. So apparently now the woods are super haunted. No one goes near them. Like seriously, everyone you talk to says it. There's 1,000,001 different stories about shit that's happened there. But I've been going out there for ages now, and I've never seen shit, even at night. It's actually really cool in there, because there's these ruins from where the town used to be like 200 years ago. There's this homeless guy, by choice I think, who lives in one of the old houses, and he says he's never seen shit either. But I don't know, maybe he lives in the unhaunted part of the woods.
I don't have any links, and I can't find anything about it online. I grew up in a small hamlet called East Berne in New York State. It's a sparsely populated area with massive forests and farmland. I spent much of my time outside looking for spoopy things, and the area was full of them. Backcountry people that lived in camouflaged shacks hidden from sight, abandoned homes and RVs overtaken by nature. You get the point. It was a terrifying but exciting area to grow up in. My father and I spent much of our free time mountain biking on the 4x4 and dirt bike trails. On one of our journeys, we stumbled across a small family graveyard. It was overgrown, and I remember several children being buried there. It was not far from our house, which was strange. It was located in the corner of a field we passed through often. We had just never noticed it before. We continued our ride and forgot about it.
A few months later, I made a plan to go to the graveyard and make charcoal rubbings with some friends. To my embarrassment, I could not find it. I searched the area carefully but was unable to find a trace of it. Years later, when I was in high school, I made my friends come camping with me. My real motive was to find the graveyard, but I did not tell this to them until we were out in the woods. We had my truck packed to the brim with rifles, bows, canned soup, and beer, and I was determined not to leave until we found it. The story sucks and ends here. I never found it. My father remembers the graveyard, but not its location. It's possible that I got turned around, but have since searched every part of every field for it. It still bothers me to this day, and I've even gone searching this month with the aid of my quad, but no luck. Any ideas /X/?
I'm from upstate New York, too. Those family plots are all over where I live. Usually they're right next to an old farmhouse or the foundation ruins of one. Those get heavily overgrown with plant life all the time. If so, you would need to clear the brush to see it again, let alone find it.
One off the top of my head is an old tuberculosis hospital and one-time Native American residence. It's a Girl Scout camp now, but apparently there are still reports of moaning and apparitions. By the coast, there are a bunch of World War I era bunkers. Never saw any action, but they are still pretty creepy and fun to explore, but they've mostly been sealed off. I've heard of some people experiencing malevolent forces. A friend and his dad were on a mountain and saw what he described as an object that looked sort of like a kite, flying very quickly and high up across the sky. My middle school was built on a Native American burial ground, and the village was in the woods behind it where we used to play capture the flag. Never actually saw anything though, and haven't heard of anything spoopy happening. There are some other creepy structures and stuff in the woods around here, but I don't know most of the stories too well.
One of the most frightening apparitions in the catalog of North Carolina hauntings comes from the quiet mountain town of Valle Crucis. This small town takes its name, which is Latin for Valley of the Cross, from the two streams which meet at right angles in the middle of the valley. The morning mist lingers longer in the Valley of the Cross than elsewhere in the mountains, and even on sunny days the town has a quietness to it that seems to set it apart from the rest of the world. But it's at night that the supernatural side of Valle Crucis reveals itself. There's a certain old stone church, located along Highway 194 just on the edge of town, where among the leaning graves in the churchyard cemetery, something that could not possibly be from this world steps in and out of the shadows. It happened one time that two young men were driving along this road around midnight. It was a clear night and the moon was full, bathing the valley in an eerie white glow. As their car turned a corner passing the old church, the two young men saw a shadow leap out from behind one of the graves and into the road in front of them. Swerving to avoid whatever had landed in the road, the driver slammed his foot on the brake and pulled off onto the side of the narrow road. Wondering what he had almost hit, he craned his head around over his shoulder to see what was in the road. It was a dog, but not an ordinary dog. This was a dog as tall and as wide as a full-grown man, covered with bristling black fur and bearing its massive yellow teeth, and the animal's eyes were glowing, not reflecting light like a dog's eyes will do, but actually glowing, burning with a smoldering red light that seemed to have about it something of the very fires of hell. The one young man turned to the other and asked, "Do you see that?" "No," his friend replied, "and neither do you." The animal began to walk towards their parked car. By mutual and unspoken agreement, the driver lifted his foot off of the brake and slammed it down on the accelerator. They roared off down the mountain road, taking the hairpin turns and twists of the road in 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. It was only when the driver looked in the rearview mirror that he realized the dog was still following them and keeping up with them, and even gaining on them. Panicked and expecting the jaws of the dog to wrap around the bumper of the car and drag it back into hell, the driver gave one final push on the accelerator, and just as the beast was about to catch them, the car leapt over the bridge, the water just below where the streams meet and across, and the dog stopped following them. They watched it fade into the distance and wondered what supernatural law it was that the animal was obliged to obey that kept its territory limited by the boundaries of the water. The two young men drove into Boone and went to the local Waffle House, since it was the only place around that was open 24 hours, and they both knew that neither one was going to sleep that night. This story was told to me some years ago by the man who said he was driving the car that night. I can vouch for him being a generally honest fellow, and all I can add is that whenever I drive by that church in Valle Crucis, I always anxiously count the seconds until I reach the bridge.
Grew up in a village called Steel End in Fife, Scotland. Many tales, many young, sinister deaths in the nearby village of Saline. Anyway, story goes, in the late 60s, A bus was driving from Saline to Steel End. There's a section maybe a couple hundred yards long, running through a wooded area. Driver and conductor on their last run of the evening saw a witch's coven walking across the road from left to right uphill. The driver shut his eyes and drove right through. The strange things where they were walking from was the direction of an old ruin, and they were walking towards a large standing stone. Uphill to the right, 50-foot cliff after the tree line on the left. Remembered the story as an adult and looked into the ruins. It turns out they were the residence of a wizard. Google it. Saline Hill Ruins. We used to camp at the top of the hill as teens. Scary as feck.
The Brown Mountain Lights have been observed for centuries, and multiple legends have arisen around the phenomenon. The Cherokee were aware of the lights, and according to some accounts, claimed that the lights were the souls of Cherokee women searching for their men who had died in a great battle between the Cherokee and the Catawba that took place on Brown Mountain. Another legend says that the lights are the ghostly echoes of lights that appeared during a search for a murdered woman in the 19th century. But what was once the most widely known legend was recorded in song in the 1950s by the sweethearts of country music. Scott Wiseman and Myrtle Eleanor Cooper were both North Carolina natives who sang records as Lulu Bell and Scotty from the 1920s until the 1950s. A married couple, the two performed together from 1935 until 1958 as regulars on the Chicago radio station's WLS-AM's National Barn Dance program. At the time, they were one of the biggest acts in country music. The song Brown Mountain Light, penned by Wiseman, tells a version of the story where a man, accompanied by a slave, becomes lost while hunting on the mountain. The man is never found. The slave returns to the mountain every night with a lantern to hunt for him, carrying on this search even from beyond the grave. Wiseman, who was from nearby Boone, said this version of the story is one he had from his uncle, who took him hunting and camping near Brown Mountain. The song rose to the top of the country charts and subsequently became the best-known version of the legend for a generation. The legend of Brown Mountain recorded in the Lulu Bell and Scotty song is somewhat dated, particularly in regard to its unforgivable romanticizing of slavery. Indeed, it's easy to imagine a retelling of this story where the lights are from people looking for the slave who, when realizing he was alone on the mountain, seized his chance and hightailed it for Ohio and freedom. As for the lights themselves, many different possible scientific explanations have been offered, from swamp gas to the reflections of automobile headlights from the valley below. But every explanation offered up so far seems to be too easily disproved. The lights have been observed since before automobiles existed, so headlights are hardly an explanation. The lights are even observed during the 1916 flood that shut down all automobile and railway traffic in the valley below. The swamp gas theory seems to be crimped somewhat by the distinct absence of a swamp on Brown Mountain. Whatever their cause, people still flock to see the Brown Mountain lights, but spotting them is never guaranteed. Reportedly, your best chance to see the lights comes in October and November. After all, the leaves are off the trees. Where to go to see the lights? Brown Mountain is located in the Pisgah National Forest, and there are a few nearby overlooks commonly used to observe the lights. Brown Mountain Overlook, located 20 miles north of Morganton on North Carolina Highway 181, 1 mile south of the Barkhouse picnic area, Wiseman's View. Overlook can be found 5 miles south of Linville Falls on Kistler Memorial Highway, which is also Old North Carolina 105 and State Road 1238. Lost Cove Cliffs Overlook, which is found on the Blue Ridge Parkway at milepost 310, 2 miles north of the North Carolina Highway 181 junction. The lights are most commonly seen on clear, dry nights in the autumn. Moonless nights can be a boon to visibility. The lights are a relatively rare occurrence, and many people have sat on a car hood late into the evening, staring into the darkness and seeing nothing. But it's definitely worth a look.
In the mountains of the southern Appalachians, from North Carolina down through Georgia and Alabama, the remains of ancient stone structures line the ridges. Some of these are additions to natural rock formations. Others are entirely man-made. Who built these structures? Are they the remains of an ancient war fought in the Appalachians? Are they all that's left of the Moon-Eyed people? The Moon-Eyed people are a race of small men who, according to Cherokee legend, once lived in the southern Appalachians. The Moon-eyed people were said to be physically very different from the Cherokee, being bearded and having pale skin. They were called moon-eyed because they were unable to see in daylight, their sensitive eyes being blinded by the sun. For this reason, they were strictly nocturnal and lived in underground caverns. Perhaps the most famous structure associated with the Moon-eyed people is just over the North Carolina border in Georgia at Fort Mountain. Now, a state park, Fort Mountain gets its name from the 850-foot-long stone wall that varies in height from 2 to 6 feet and stretches along the top of the ridge. This stone wall is thought to have been constructed around 400 to 500 AD. According to one Cherokee legend, this wall is a remnant of a war that the Moon-eyed people fought and lost against the neighboring Creek Nation. The Creeks drove the Moon-eyed people from their homeland during a full moon, which even the pale light of is blinding to these nocturnal people. Another version of the story is that it was the Cherokee themselves who waged war against the Moon-eyed people, driving them from their home at Hiwassee, a village near what is now Murphy, North Carolina, west into Tennessee. Both versions of the story say the Moon-eyed people began living underground after losing the war. Cherokee cosmology is complex and fascinating and describes a universe where humans share the world with other, non-human supernatural peoples. In the traditional Cherokee concept of the world, races such as the Nunehi or the Yunwitsudi are a part of the natural world who interact with humans at their own discretion, similar to the traditional idea of fairies in the British Isles. However, what's interesting is that the Moon-eyed people are never described as being supernatural, but are remembered as another group of humans who were physically very different from the Native Americans. Because the description of the Moon-eyed people is that they are pale-skinned and bearded, this has led to some amount of speculation, quite a bit of it wild, that the legend of the Moon-eyed people represents a Cherokee folk memory of contact with a group of European settlers who made it to the New World before Columbus. Particularly, the Cherokee legend of the Moon-eyed people has been matched up with the Welsh legend of Prince Madoc. According to the Welsh story, Madoc ab Owain Gwynedd was a Welsh prince who, disenchanted with the civil war racking his homeland, set sail with his brother Rhirid and a few followers in 1170 across the Atlantic Ocean and landed somewhere around Mobile Bay, Alabama. After some exploring up and down the rivers of Southern America, Madoc decided he liked the place well enough and decided to move in. Leaving Rhirid and some of his fellow Welshmen behind, Madoc returned to his native country and recruited enough followers to fill 10 ships. He and his colonists set sail back to America and were never heard from in Wales again. Some have speculated that the Moon-eyed people are the descendants of Madoc's colonists, and that it was these Welshmen who fought a war with the Cherokee, and these Welshmen who built the stone forts that dot the ridges of the mountains. Driven out by the Cherokee, Madoc's descendants found their way south to Florida and Alabama, where they continued to live in, slowly absorbing bits of Native American culture until they became a strange tribe of pale Indians, living and dressing in native ways.
Grandfather Mountain stands above Blowing Rock Highway near Linville. The mountain gets its name from the mountain's profile, which resembles the head of a bearded old man laying down in sleep. The unique and gorgeous natural environment around Grandfather has long been a draw for visitors to the North Carolina mountains. Grandfather Mountain was operated as a private tourist attraction for many years, until 2011, when it was purchased by the state of North Carolina and is now a publicly owned nature preserve. The mountain has been a source of inspiration to many, including Shepherd M. Duggar, who praises its beauty in extremely flowery language in his highly odd combination of historical romance and travel guide, The Balsam Groves of Grandfather Mountain. Originally published in 1907, Duggar's book is often cited as some of the finest bad writing ever produced by a North Carolina author. But as bad as his prose may be, Duggar is not alone in finding beauty in the woods and trails of Grandfather Mountain. Hiking is one of the prime attractions that brings people to the park. The park's 11 trails cover miles of terrain, and the more difficult backcountry trails take hikers through unique ecosystems that are home to dozens of rare and endangered species. It's on one of these trails that something even more rare has been seen, the ghost of a lost hiker. The phantom hiker of Grandfather Mountain is said to be an older man, bearded, with a rough and grizzled appearance. He can be distinguished from a living hiker by the lack of neoprene and Gore-Tex in his wardrobe. Instead, he's said to wear old-fashioned workman's clothes that look like they're from somewhere in the middle of the 20th century. He wears a rough canvas army backpack and carries a long walking stick. The phantom hiker is said to appear mostly as the evening is settling in, when most of the day hikers have left or are working their way back. He never says anything and will never acknowledge any greeting. He simply appears walking along one of the trails in the backcountry, moves swiftly ahead of anyone else he encounters, and then simply vanishes. No one knows who this mysterious figure is. Some have suggested that he was a hiker who became lost in the thick woods around the mountain and fell or was injured and was unable to make his way back out. Others have said he's just the spirit of a man who loved the mountain so much that he chose to stay there after he died. This ghostly hiker seems to do no harm. He seems to want little to do with people in general. He only seems to be there, like all the other visitors, to enjoy the natural wonder of Grandfather Mountain. How to get there? Grandfather Mountain Nature Preserve is located 2 miles north of Linville on US 221 near Blue Ridge Parkway at milepost 305. The admission price covers access to all the hiking trails, exhibits, and the famous mile-high swinging bridge.
Have you ever hiked deep into the North Carolina Smokies and gotten the distinct feeling as if something was watching you? And were you certain you saw something out of the corner of your eye only to find it was just the rustling of dead leaves on a tree? But wait, was it only the leaves or was it something else? These old mountains hold a story that very few know of, and even fewer have witnessed: the legend of Boojum. Since today is Halloween and many of you are making plans to venture deep into the North Carolina Smokies for one last fall hike, it's only fitting that I share this piece of Haywood County folklore with you. We've all heard of Bigfoot sightings throughout the United States and seen the supposed pictures and video footage, but little did you know that we have a similar being roaming about the Balsam Mountains of Haywood County. One might say the Boojum is similar to the abominable snowman of the Himalayas or the Wampus cat in the swamps of eastern North Carolina. But Boojum is a unique creature of his own and Haywood County is his home, though no one has actually gotten close enough to clearly describe him. It's said he is around 8 feet tall and a mixture of both man and beast. He has thick, shaggy gray hair and a human-like face, but is by no means handsome. He is mostly seen from afar on rocky mountain cliffs or outcroppings when twilight falls, and can sometimes be heard moaning deep in the woods near hiking trails. As previously mentioned, Boojum's home is said to be in the Balsam Mountains, a range that adjoins the Blue Ridge Mountains in southwestern Haywood County. Most folks recognize the Balsams by the notable peaks of Cold Mountain, Shining Rock, Richland Balsam, and Black Balsam Knob. While I don't recommend going on a quest to find Boojum, as he may be quite frightening to stumble upon, he is apparently harmless unless threatened. Boojum is best known by his 2 great loves, a fondness of pretty girls and his desire for the precious gemstones found throughout western North Carolina, such as rubies, amethysts, emeralds, and sapphires. It is said that in the early 1900s, it was not uncommon for women bathing in secluded mountain streams to find they were being watched by Boojum from beneath the camouflage of mountain laurels or rhododendron bushes. The startled women would quickly grab their belongings and run away. This often conjured up an angry pack of men from the surrounding area in a gallant effort to hunt the Boojum down, but never with any success. He most surely retreated to one of his many hidden caves in the balsams where he lived and hoarded his collection of gemstones. Though it is rare for anyone to find his caves, he has created a unique way of protecting his jewels, but storing them at the bottom of stone jugs. He then fills the jugs with pertinent juice, or what is most commonly known as moonshine. Even if a gem seeker should happen to find one of his many jugs, no self-respecting mountaineer would dare waste this coveted liquid by pouring it on the ground. They would drink the contents until empty, which would then be followed by a long, deep sleep. Boojum would return in the meantime and retrieve his gems, leaving the thief with nothing but a splitting headache when he awoke. Now it is also said that Boojum was not as lonely of a soul as many thought him to be. There is the story of Boojum peering down at a beautiful local girl named Annie while she was bathing in a mountain stream, but she did not run away when she noticed him watching her. Rather than taking off, she looked into his lonely eyes and was instantly drawn to him. She immediately fell in love and, to her family's dismay, chose a life with Boojum among the caves of the Balsams. Though the two loved each other deeply, Boojum could not put aside his love for precious gemstones and would often leave Annie for extended periods of time in search of jewels. Lonely Annie would often search the woods for Boojum by hollering out a sound that is described as a mixture of a wild animal screech and the hoot of an owl. Boojum would often return the call, and they would continue to follow each other's sounds until they were reunited. It is said that this hooting sound is where the old mountain term Hootenanny came from, which is used to describe a party or social gathering. The legend of Boojum is no doubt a mysterious piece Haywood County folklore, but is it only a story? To this day, there are still tales of a tall, shaggy creature roaming the Balsam Mountains, so could it be that Annie and Boojum had children? We may never know, but next time you are deep in the woods of Haywood County and hear a screech you can't quite describe, or you feel an eerie sense when taking a dip in a local stream, you may just be in the presence of the Boojum. And remember, do not drink the pertinent juice.
I was on a trip to Burlington, North Carolina today and was informed of a legend regarding a local high school. The legend is, a girl was asked to prom by the star quarterback who subsequently stood her up. Distraught, she threw herself from the 3rd floor of the school. Rumor has it, if you look up at the window from which she threw herself and start insulting her, she will appear in the window. There is also a stop sign behind the school which is rumored to bleed. I couldn't help but test it, since we were passing through that area. First of all, the school is creepy as shit as is. Very run down and distraught, although it's still operational. There's also a creepy-ass statue of the school's mascot, a bulldog, in the back. We went around back to where the window in question was. I called out the girl's name and informed her I'd taken a long trip to see her, and that I'd appreciate her coming to visit. Before I could finish my sentence, this really cute girl walked up to the window with a stone-faced expression. My heart skipped a beat, but I decided to smile and wave. She then smiled very warmly and waved back. I guess it was just a student who was there for drama rehearsal. There were cars in the parking lot and the window was linked to the auditorium. Must have been privy to the rumor and accustomed to morons coming in from out of town and trying it out. Her response time was quick though, and she definitely nailed the ghostly facial expression. We then checked out the ghostly stop sign, which I thought would be immaculate until you started insulting it. It's just smeared with some sort of fake blood. Despite being there for several months, it's still red as opposed to the brownish hue that blood turns after a while. Kinda corny, but probably some sort of school tradition, as this phenomenon allegedly persists even after the city changes the stop sign.
Where I'm from, there's a small cement bridge over a ravine called Gibbs Bridge, off the main road, Gibbs Road, that's supposedly haunted. The story goes if you park your car, honk 3 times, then put the keys on the roof of your car. Your car will shake violently. You hear a dealing shriek coming from inside the car, and when you reach up to grab your keys to skedaddle, they're gone. A few years back, a buddy and I were stoned and went to try it. We did everything we were supposed to do. After a few seconds, we saw headlights approaching from behind us. A lot of stoners do this so the cops watch and wait to bust kids with pot. We figured that was the case. Reached for the keys, they were gone. Grabbed out flashlights and got out to look in case they just slid off or something. The headlights weren't getting any closer, so that kinda creeped me out. I start to panic a bit. Whether it be cops or paranormal, I didn't want to stick around for either. I was standing by the driver's side rear quarter panel looking behind and underneath the car when my screaming buddy went flying onto then over the trunk and landed a few feet in front of me, like he was on the receiving end of a Bruce Lee kick or some shit. He landed hard and got the wind knocked out of him and was kinda disoriented, so I grabbed him up under the arms, ran him to the passenger side and opened the door. I ran around and jumped in the driver's seat, grabbed the spare key I brought in case this shit was real, and we peeled off. After a few minutes, I asked him what hit him. He said he was hit but pulled from behind. Haven't gone back to that bridge day or night.
I'm from Florida, and the Everglades are not too far from where I am. There is a whole bunch of land that was meant for development but got abandoned for whatever reason. My friends and I call this area BadLuck. Anyways, we went out with this redneck kid who knows the area real well and knows all the stories. The one he showed us was the spot where, if you look through the trees at a certain spot, you could see the top of a house with the light turned on in the upstairs window. Apparently a man went crazy and murdered his family with an axe there. The house was leveled, and according to legend, you can only see it at midnight. We camped out there in BadLuck and went back the next day, early in the afternoon. The house wasn't there. Very strange experience. Florida is known for its weirdness, though.
Very cool. Any backwoods areas are very creepy even without the lore. I've been to Florida once and I can imagine the swampier areas, for example the Glades, being prone to a lot of legend. I have another story. There's a mystery spot in Rocky Mount, North Carolina called the Seven Bridges Road. According to the legend, when you drive one way and count the bridges, there are 7. Then when you drive the other way, there are only 6. Most stupid bullshit I've ever wasted my time on. It's not even one of those things where you figure out the illusion. We counted 7 bridges up and 7 bridges down. Just a stupid attempt at a tourist trap. I think the thing is that there's one half-assed bridge that may look more like a bridge one way than the other, but you'd have to be mentally handicapped to not still identify it on the way back.
Still very creepy nonetheless. There's another local story that is at least partway true. There is this legend of these tiny inbred people called squallies. They apparently live in the backwoods of the Golden Gate Estates, which is literally the sticks. They apparently live in and around this house that is highly protected. They're supposed to be highly aggressive and territorial. The creepy thing is that the house is very real. There is an off-road that you turn down, and there is a sign that says something like, "If you value your life, turn around. Private property." And if you make it past that to the house, some crazy redneck will shoot at your car with a shotgun. I've seen the sign, but I've never tried to find the house. MITZU. According to local legend, the squallies are directly connected to the place.
Back when I was a kid, I lived in a city called Bradford, a bit like Detroit. It was a real shithole, former cotton wool industry before it collapsed. Anyway, I used to live in an area with the woods, hills, and shit behind my house. And my friend's dad was an alcoholic. When he was around us, he used to mumble about a compound where a lot of satanic worship went on. We were like 6 or 7, didn't know what this meant. So one morning, we set off up the hill to find this place. It didn't work, we never found it. But on one occasion, I remember there was supposed to be some drunk criminal hiding, yet the police were not allowed up there for whatever reason. We were all ordered inside. But my friend and I, being the rebels, we are hid in a bush hideout near the top of this hill about 10 minutes from my house. After God knows how long later, British armed forces in black outfits turn up, followed by some men in hazmat suits. My friend and I bolted pretty quickly, never found out what it was. When my parents asked the police, they said they didn't know anything about it. Tried looking for the compound with my dog about a year back when I was visiting my parents, but still didn't find it. Went back to our hideout, still nothing. I wonder if it was some satanic bullshit why the armed forces turned up.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.